Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. With host and founder, Richard Case, and co-host and retreat leader, Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today, we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is End Times Friday, and this will actually be airing our first week of January, which will be appropriate because we have our great friends, Denny Weinberg, that's part of our ministry, and then Eric Sirkin, who is a business person from Israel, and you live in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, right? And now, but you're in America right now, right?
I'm in the United States at the moment, in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yep. So he'll be here for the Christmas vacation, and it's good to have you. And so we're excited to have you. And then Rabbi, you're seeing us you're in Jerusalem right now, right?
I'm in Jerusalem. Just landed a couple hours ago from Miami.
Oh, really?
Oh, excellent.
What did you do in Miami?
I was visiting mom mostly.
Oh, cool. Do you enjoy the warm weather down there? Or?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Although it's almost as warm in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right now. Not usually, but right, it was great there.
Yeah. Well, since the last time we were together, lots and lots of things have happened, and we want to cover lots of them because we have the Hezbollah ceasefire, we have Syria that happened, things that are happening in Iran, Gaza, and the hostage situation, and so we want to explore all these and get perspective from Rabbi about the spiritual temperature of all this. So I would say, Eric, why don't we start with and Rabbi, what exactly happened in Syria, and what was the implication of that just by itself?
So in my Substack, I actually had predicted that the weakening of Hezbollah would provide an opportunity to the rebel movement in Syria, but I had never imagined that they would move so quickly in actually taking over the country. That was a bit unexpected on my part. Right now it's a coalition of resistance movements against the government that took over. But the general fear is that the mainstream unit or rebel movement is a strain of ISIS and Al Qaeda. The leader was a former member and a leader in those organizations who claims he has reformed. He remains on the United States wanted list. So he has a lot to prove to the contrary to convince, primarily he needs to convince the local minorities because there are quite a few in Syria. There's a large Christian community in Syria, I think of 1 million, and there's a Druze community, and there's an Alawite. Alawites are like the Shiite Muslims. It's like a strain of Shiite Islam. The president for life, I guess no longer president, Assad, and his father, who started this dictator, are members of that group, of the Alawites. So there's a lot of concern in Syria and countries nearby looking to see how these minorities will get treated by this government. And that will be a good weather vane on what's really going to happen next. From Israel's perspective, I'd say overall what happened was good news. There's a lot of it's good but kind of reaction. The main thing it accomplishes to the benefit of Israel is that it's going to curtail the conduit for weapons that are flowing from Iran to Hezbollah. And that's the main plus. Israel took the initiative, the IDF, and went out like in 2 days, destroying like 200 military sites within Syria, including the chemical weapons factory, which, as we all may remember, during President Obama's term, was his quote unquote red line that he then changed to erase the red line and didn't do anything. So it looks like if the IDF, his intelligence is correct, it's managed to wipe out the chemical weapons that were always a threat to its own population as well as neighbors, along with its weak Air Force, its weak Navy, and everything else that could look at to basically block those arms from falling into the hands of the rebels that Israel's concerned about.
Let me ask you one question about that. So when they say they destroyed chemical weapons, how do they do that so they don't actually unleash the chemicals? How does that work?
I'm a chemist, so I should know, I guess. But my guess is that they weren't mixed properly, or they were actually factories. So maybe or maybe they're underground. I really don't know. But there are no reports of anyone being harmed other than whoever might have been in those facilities at the time. And so, and then Israel went ahead and took the initiative of placing troops in the sort of UN zone between Syria and Israel on the Golan Heights, and even moved some tanks across the border in what the government argues is a temporary situation, has no intentions of any annexation or anything like that, but it's just a precaution to prevent those villages nearby from falling in the wrong hands, which is the main concern in Israel. And there's really no reason for Israel to move in and take over that territory because it does hold the strategic high ground in the Golan Heights. It's really not it is really, I think we should take the government at its word that there's really no long-term interest in doing that. Having said that, however, there were reports in the Israeli press that there were straw polls, or if you call them votes, taken in the Druze in Syria mostly live in the southern part of the country, bordering along the Jordanian border, and which is not far from Israel. And many of those villages requested to be annexed by Israel, which is just sort of an interesting anecdote. I don't think it means a lot because Israel's not going to, at least not that I'm aware of, do anything to move forward in that direction. Although the Druze are well thought of and admired within Israel, and they serve in the army and right along the Jewish population. And many of them, after their army service, either sign up for a lot, being permanently in the army, or as a career, I should say, or in the police. And they're very common in both areas. So that's kind of the Syria picture. Everyone's sort of watching and waiting to see what happens. In the meantime, I think in part because of the stranglehold that the IDF put on the arms movement into Hezbollah prior to the rebels taking over Syria, and then subsequent to that the Hezbollah has been pretty quiet. There haven't been any rockets fired from Syria, from either Syria or Lebanon by Hezbollah. It's not quite clear. The Israeli troops, the IDF troops, had 2 months to withdraw from southern Lebanon, according to the ceasefire agreement. There were some moves to start that, although there are ongoing reports in the Israeli press, I wouldn't say daily, but at least weekly, where they uncover a new facility of Hezbollah and then go around blowing it up. So there's still IDF troops in Lebanon. Some have been pulled down to the border, but there's still many that remain. And I think Israel's just watching the situation because to make sure Hezbollah lives up to its part of the bargain.
Yeah, and you actually had predicted that they would agree to the ceasefire if there was a condition that if they come back into southern Lebanon past the Litani River, that Israel can go back in and attack them. Is that part of the condition? And did that
Yes,
happen?
it is. And the IDF will not pull all of its troops out until it's confirmed that that's the case. And that'll take a while to happen. There are sporadic operations by the IDF, but since the ceasefire started, there's not been a single, well, at least not to my knowledge, maybe Ephraim, you've been reading more, but I don't think there's been a single missile launched against the city of Beirut or its environment around it. So that part of the ceasefire is certainly holding. There have been a few sorties by the IDF against positions of Hezbollah, but nothing in near population areas.
The disallow all of those. You said there were 100,000 plus people displaced from northern Israel and the Golan. Are they now able to go back in and go back to their homes?
The government has formally told this population that they can return to their homes. But of course, it's a free country and no one's forced to. What the government will slowly do, probably over the next month is my guess. These families have been getting sort of stipends from the government to help them live in wherever they're living outside of their homes, as well as many of their businesses have sort of collapsed because of the situation. But my guess is that the government will start restricting those compensation packages in order to encourage the families to go back, starting probably over the next few weeks, because the reality is that the IDF is, to the best of its knowledge, destroyed the ability for Hezbollah to launch a raid across the border of any size. And the rocket fire has diminished to virtually nothing in the north now. So there's really nothing stopping the families from moving back other than their own, attitudes.
Is there anything to go back to after all the fires?
No, but
what has the destruction level been?
Allocated money in a budget. I can't comment whether it's enough or not to help the families reconstruct their homes. There are towns like Kiryat Shmona and Metula, which are in the very far north of the country, which look like they're from an apocalyptic movie, will need to be rebuilt. But there'll be funds from the government to assist the families in rebuilding those facilities. And there's been money, I know, allocated to start building more bomb shelters in the north than they have. And the same thing's happening in the south. So there's actually specific ministries created temporarily to oversee the repatriation and the reconstruction of the communities along the Lebanese border and along the Gaza border both.
And Rabbi, what is the reaction of the population and the spiritual temperature of these events that you now have a ceasefire, Syria, there's something that's happened in Syria, and a return back to the north? What's the feeling, the attitude? How are they looking at all this?
Okay, good question. First of all, that was an excellent analysis by Eric, I have to say. That was great. The reaction, well, overall, the global picture, we're now in the Hebrew month of Kislev, and we're about a week away from the holiday of Hanukkah, which is basically the celebration of the few against the mighty, when the Jewish people fought a miraculous battle against our Greek oppressors who were trying to destroy Judaism permanently, and a few people rose up against the world's greatest empire that ever stood on the planet and defeated them, and the miracle of Jewish survival. And so I think a lot of us feel that we are reliving the Hanukkah miracle in our time, that we keep on seeing enemy after enemy after enemy falling down, being destroyed by it. In Israel, although we're a military power, but we're a tiny country, tiny population relative to Lebanon, relative to Syria, relative to Iran, relative to Yemen, and certainly relative to all our surrounding neighbors who would like us destroyed. So there's sort of I guess, a spiritual excitement seeing prophecies carried out in times, and seeing, and you of course know the verse from Genesis that those who bless us shall be blessed, those who curse us will be cursed. My friend is a tour guide, and he made Eric Ken Spiro. He has a T-shirt that says it's got a chart on it, and it says they tried to destroy us. And then it's got a list of every nation, like Persia, Babylon, Rome, Greece, Egypt. And it goes on for like 20 different countries. Germany, they tried to destroy us. And then each one, it's got like an X. They got destroyed. And then like he ends with like a small country with a very big friend upstairs. Don't start up with that.
Love it.
Every nation who tries to destroy us, unfortunately, they seem to have some success along the way, which is very painful, but every one of them ends up being destroyed in the end. And so it's nice to see our enemies losing their ability to hurt us and facing consequences for the evil that they are trying to commit. That's the
and by the way, we as Christian believers, those that understand what you just said about Israel is really important, because a lot of people that are of the church have kind of dismissed, that it's called a replacement theology. And the replacement theology is, that was Israel back then, but now it's the church, and it's all been replaced by the church. But particularly because we have in Paul, our one of the apostles, he wrote in Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11 all about what you just said. And we believe that because of the New Testament and the Old Testament, that it says actually as we approach the end, Israel's the center of everything, and the restoration of Israel, and that they're protected. And I got to get a hold of that shirt, because I would love to I would like to wear that shirt, because like, this is true. Do you see this? And so it's just kind of cool that you're saying that the people are a little bit excited. They feel a little excited.
And then also there's, we've gone through a year and a half of hell, and where we have also, on top of our own suffering, which I don't know how it's been in the news, but I mean, people are being, until today, like every day people are dying. We still have 100 hostages in Gaza. There's been a lot of pain, anguish, suffering, fear, loss. It's been really hard. And I think Jewish people for sure feel this everywhere, even if they don't live in Israel. So it's nice to have this. I think people are feeling hope, which was hard to feel for a long time, but now there's hope that the situation can change. And we also were feeling really quite isolated, with not many friends in the world, lots of condemnations, lots of people like, I'm from Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, who might say over and over, Israel has a right to defend itself, but then the minute we try and defend ourselves in whatever means possible, even you can't do that, you can't do that, you
Yeah,
can't do
right.
that. But of course you can defend yourself, but you can't do that, and you can't do that. Well, what should we do? I think that that leads us into the Trump effect, but I'm sure we'll get into that
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
I ask
Yeah.
I was just going to ask one other question on the spiritual temperature based on the things that you're saying and people seeing God's favor on Israel and experiencing that. Are you seeing a resurgence of faith where I know generations have somewhat fallen away and become a little more lax on their draw to God? Has this whole experience, do you believe, is it resurging faith? Are people beginning to seek God again and see his power over this? Or are you seeing an impact in that?
Good question. I would say yes to a small degree, but it's the continuing of an ongoing trend. Israel has been experiencing that move towards God, towards religion for a good couple of decades. And I think each one of these things that we go through does increase that awareness that this thing is just too bizarre, too miraculous, there's got to be some sort of an upper hand. I mean, just give you an example. Like someone said to me recently, like, the whole thing tells you the Jewish people definitely means something. There would be so many people who are so determined to destroy us and getting so much support from so many countries all over the world. If we didn't mean something, we're just, just trying to live our lives and make high-tech companies and that help the world and mind our own business and go to the beach. And everyone's trying to kill us all the time. Like, and this has been going on for, for thousands of years. And so the Jewish people definitely mean something. And that also for Jewish people, a lot of Jewish, like in the secular Israel, that segment of the population, even as they founded the state of Israel very much on that idea that we just want to be a nation amongst nations. We just want to be the same as everybody else.
Right.
And we couldn't do that when we were living as a minority in Germany and France and England and Europe. Muslim countries, because they always tried to kill us and do pogroms and persecute us and treat us as second-class citizens. So we thought, oh, well, if we have our own country and just mind our own business and don't bother anyone, then everything will be fine. And then we go and do that, and still people target us. And so those people who just wanted to be like everyone else and live a secular country are saying, well, wow, like even without, we don't want to be. I think a lot of them feel like, I don't want to be something special. I just want to be a regular human being going to the beach and making a living. But we keep being reminded there is something really significant about the Jewish people. And if we don't recognize it, other people will remind us.
Right.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the hostages in Gaza. Eric, what's the latest on that? And is there a agreement that is imminent coming about? What's your thought about that?
It would appear that first of all, let me comment on Ephraim. I think I agree with almost everything he said. I think what he missed was that he knows is that there's also a demographic factor that's affecting the growth of the more observant part of society in Israel, that's shifting it to be more observant, as well as sort of the dynamic of political forces in play. And because the religious families tend to be larger than the secular families, and by considerable margin. And so by natural growth, this is changing in the country as well. So coming back to your question about the hostages, so I think it's fair to say that the bulk of the Israeli population, I'm not saying everybody, but the bulk of the population won't feel like this war is over until the hostages alive and dead are returned to Israel. And until that, it's going to be a very big open sore in the country that's not going to go away. Given Hamas is not dead, it's not destroyed, has the capability a bit to resurrect itself and into a force once again in the future. That being said, it appears now that the government is moving towards a position where it's going to agree to, in stages, to a long-term ceasefire. There's no such thing as peace in this part of the world, but there's such a thing as a long-term ceasefire. And so it's moving towards a long-term ceasefire in Gaza in return for getting back its hostages intact in stages. There are demands by Hamas, of course, that they want to see some of the prisoners in sitting Israeli prisons released. These are now convicted. These are people that have stood trial, that were convicted of murder in one form or another. in some cases, multiple murders through terror, typically. So the ones that are more nefarious, according to what's being reported in the public press, that Israel is going to agree to release some of them, but they're not going to be released into Judea, Samaria, or Gaza. They're going to be released into a third country, such as Turkey and Iran. One thing I forgot to say early on is that Turkey lent financial and military support to the rebels that took over Syria. Turkey has occupied part of Syria since the civil war for over 10 years. No one seems to care or talk about it. It's only if it's Jews that occupy something, people care. And Turkey's been a very big patron of this group that's basically taken over. It's a part of the Muslim Brotherhood network. So coming back to the hostages, it does look like there's a deal that's within a week or two of getting signed, and will hopefully bring back the hostages.
And then that will, Rabbi, that will bring another level of enthusiasm, right, to end that conflict, so to speak, and solve that point. What will the people feel about that?
That's a harder one. That whole deal is gonna tear our soul, not our soul, our stomach, kishkas. And how do I translate kishkas? It's a really hard one, because we've been to this one before, and releasing large numbers of terrorists who are just try for more, that is going to really hurt. Getting back a lot of dead bodies that were taken hostage is going to hurt. I don't think anybody's going to be, dancing in the streets too much over this one. It's just the whole deal is just really too painful. And there's going to be a lot of controversy about whatever the deal is going to be, although there's a lot of support amongst the people for a deal, because everyone is just so heartbroken that these children and elderly people, and some of children without their parents, and it's just awful that they're hostages in Gaza. But with a lot of the way we got into this mess of October 7th, the leader of the October 7th attack, Yahya Sinwar, was in Israeli jail for terrorism, and was exchanged in a similar type of hostage exchange, where we gave 1,000 or something convicted terrorists to get one Israeli back from being hostage in Gaza, and they held him for years before we actually did the deal. So, we'll be very, very comforted to have our Jewish brothers back, but with a very, very painful price, and with a lot of worry about where that will go. And a lot of people will oppose it too.
Yeah, we're at the end of our time here. We'll next session, we want to pick this up about the worry about the Trump factor, about Netanyahu's scenario with their attitude toward him and his trial. And then we want to get into, therefore, the real implication is about Iran. And what the heck does that mean? What does that look like? And what do you see over the next, 6 to 12 months because of that? So we want to get into all that. And we got lots and lots of questions. Thank you so much for giving us this update, insight. It's a pleasure to receive actual information about what's really happening, and our audience is certainly reflective of it. And by the way, I just want to let you two know that we get a lot of input about, thank you so much for their ability to communicate, give us information, and would you continue to please have them on the program? And the answer is yes, we will. Thank you so much, and we're excited. Denny, thank you for being connected and being having the update with that. And I know that Eric is in St. Louis, and he's in a place where that's where you guys met, right? We can't hear you, Denny. You're muted.
You're muted, Denny.
Our old stomping ground back in grade school.
Yeah.
Eric and I go all the way back to kindergarten.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. If you have questions about today's broadcast, be sure to send them in to us at questions@abideministries.com, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep, see you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.